we need to be praying that we are asking for this person to come forth. Does he know he's Mashiach? And this is something that Ray and I talked about on an earlier show. I don't think he does. But I think that this person, if you read in your Torah, you read in Toledot, in the story of how Esau was originally supposed to have been the one who was to be given the mantle of leadership and the one who would be crowned with the title of Israel. Because that is, of course, it is a title. He could have easily have been a Mashiach for his day and brought in the redemption and created a nation. But of course he rejected it. And of course, thank God, his younger brother knew, because his mother told him that God had told her that the younger one was actually going to be the one to take on this mantle. And it literally was a mantle. We can see that he realized that it was a real physical task to be accomplished in the physical realm with the tools that God gave us. And it hasn't changed. We're still looking for that figure. We're still looking for someone among the Jewish people who, as they say, and this comes from, I believe, a Talmudic saying, and I'm going to put it in contemporary terms, if there is no man to do the job, then you be the man. As we like to say in America, you the man. And somebody literally needs to decide, and they're not going to decide, oh, I'm the Mashiach. They're going to decide, Israel needs a leader right now. And this is so precious, this is so timely, because even as we're having this conversation today, the current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has had this meeting with Obama in the White House. And of course, we know it's all for show anyway. But sadly, as much as I admire Bibi, and I admire his ease with the English language and his intelligence and his presence on camera, he apparently is not the man that we're looking for, because he does not default almost instantaneously in all of his thinking to Torah thinking. So we need to. So what I'm telling our listeners, I guess, is that there are people walking the streets of Jerusalem today. There are young men involved in political movements who are, for want of a better word, who are religious. But they're grounded in their Torah, in an everyday belief, and they're actively pursuing ways to change Israel and to get Israel back to her Torah form of government. Because after all, their constitution, their Bill of Rights, their deed to the land of Israel are all wrapped up in that Torah. And
they have to have that connection. That has to exist, or I think you're absolutely right about Benjamin Netanyahu. And can you imagine with his depth of knowledge, his wisdom, his experience, and as powerful as we all know that he is, as far as commanding the language and such a presence, if he's not Mashiach, it's hard to get your head around who would Mashiach be. If this guy isn't it, who is it?
I
have to be phenomenally.
Yeah, I looked to the story of Joseph and his brothers. Because Joseph was very much a Mashiach-type figure. He was a leader. And not only was he a leader, he was a world leader who impacted the known world of his day, at least in what we call the Levant, the people that the people of that region, the entire Middle East of his day. When you think about his story as we read it in especially in Miketz, the portion of Miketz, he saved that part of the world by being the de facto leader of the free world, if you will, in his day. He was a kind of he was a prime minister, and even though you had a pharaoh who was a figurehead as a ruler, he wasn't really running the country. Joseph was running. You think about this. Here was a Jewish man really calling the shots in ancient Egypt. They've literally given him the ring of power. And he ran the country and did it with such God-given wisdom. But yet his own brothers, think about this, his own brothers came and stood before him, and they didn't recognize him. And I think that's a pattern, a template that we can look for this Messianic figure. There's going to be a leader who's going to emerge in Israel, who is going to coalesce all the people around him to a point where he begins doing things in a Torah way, and one day he's going to be standing in front of his Jewish brothers and sisters, and they're going to go, my God, it's him. He was with us all along, and we didn't recognize him. And I think that's important because I think it's important because even the leaders of the other parts of the so-called free world, I think they have to be of a mind that they don't recognize this person, because if they do, they will kill him. And we've seen that happen before with, and I'm going to invoke a name that people may be uncomfortable with, Meir Kahane. Everything that Meir Kahane said has come true today. And there are people that wouldn't even whisper his name, and yet he is a person. He's an example of someone who could have taken up the mantle of leadership, and the forces in the political realm out there saw him as a danger. So I think that we'll see this figure coming into positions of power. He may be a religious leader. He may be a prime minister. And I even have my own pet theory. I think he's going to be a Baal Tshuva. I think he's going to be a Jew who grew up in the diaspora and made Aliyah. And he's going to have that understanding of what it takes to move back and forth in the political and in the business realm. But yet it's all going to be anchored in Torah for him. That's going to be always his acid test. And so those are, I guess, in a way, some of my random thoughts about this person. Because I think the events, maybe this goes without saying, and you probably talked about this in the first half, I don't think anybody who believes in God and His Torah can look around and even look at the prophets and say, we're not living in that day when this person is needed, that the rest of the world is going to turn around and go, we made a mess of things. We have made a mess of things. We don't know how to do it. And they're going to look over at little Israel. And by that time, when the rest of the world turns around, they're going to go, my goodness, those people have got their act together. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think the rest of the world is going to look for Mashiach, and they're going to look at a nation as almost as a kind of Messiah nation, if you will, led by this person. And once he does this, he's going to go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that listening to you share your thoughts, it occurs to me that you really have helped solidify the point I was wanting to make as far as Joseph and Meir Kahane and others. There's been others in Torah that were Mashiach-type figures, and even with all their greatness, can you imagine what this redemptive Mashiach is going to be like? I mean, certainly he's not going to be up on a stage performing miracles. I mean, that's not even a requirement, but he is going to have what it takes because of Hashem's wisdom. He will have
Praise
it
God.
And
Thank you,
he
Father.
will take actions to see to it that it happens.
And I just pray for the people that are necessary and that we care about.
He was commanding. He knew it, and I love the example you gave about his brothers, because we have, in fact, been talking about that there's still going to be those who do not have eyes to see and ears to hear. Because that is also a requirement. You need to have the eyes to see what is happening and the ears to hear it and believe it.
And Ray, that points out to another aspect where it falls back on all of our shoulders again. You and I and Prescott, all the Noahides listening, and all of our Jewish friends listening, is why there are some that won't have the heart or the eyes? Because they won't want to have it. You're not.
In fact, I had related that a similar circumstance in the Exodus when the Hebrews left Egypt. The sages teach us that the majority of the Hebrews stayed back in Egypt.
Yes.
They didn't want to leave. And then even on the way to Mount Sinai, they ran into troubles, and what was the first thing they wanted to do? Return to Egypt. but there was a much bigger percentage that stayed than that left. And I think we're going to see something similar, possibly, in this event.
Sadly so, because what's going to happen, what they were defaulting to, the generation of the Midbar, of the wilderness, what they defaulted to was their slave mentality. And what is facing Jews who are living in the diaspora today is a galut, a diaspora mentality. They don't want to make the sacrifices that ones have to make Aliyah and live in Israel. And I know that I'm going to upset some of my Jewish friends by saying this, because it's easy for me to point the finger and go, you should be making Aliyah. And I know it is easy for me to say that, and please, I don't mean to, but the point is that I've had friends, I've discussed.
Some might read as slavery, but in reality it's not slavery, because oftentimes these individuals who needed help, who were down and out, they would basically give themselves over to somebody and become a bond servant for somebody else. And instead you chose not to, and they take an awl to that person's earlobe and put a hole in it.
Yeah.
Jim, listen, we are at the end of our time here, and I just want to say thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And unfortunately, we have to bring it to an end, and we have to bounce on out of here. So with that, I'd like to tell the folks, thanks for being here. We're glad that you joined us and stayed with us throughout the entire hour. And Prescott, you and I will see the folks in a bit on our Plugged In show. And we'll get over there right after this. So until next time, Shavua Tov.
Shalom. It appears, just looking at all the prophetic, the messianic prophecies in Tanakh, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is almost impossible not to believe that we are living in biblical times, and the stage is set and the curtain's about to open. If what I've said makes any sense at all, if you agree with that, then tell me, Rabbi, how do we approach this Rosh Hashanah in a different way than Rosh Hashanahs of the past?
Let me start, Tovia, with a general idea. On Yom Kippur, could be said it's the holiest day of the year. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes into the Holy of Holies, the holiest place. We have so many sources in our literature, in our tradition, about the incredible power of that place called the Holy of Holies. And it's still there. It's the hole in the middle of the donut. It's the heart. And that's where the Kotel is now. Anyway, the holiest person goes into the holiest place on the holiest day. So you have a confluence of what's called Olam, which is space, which is the world. Shana, which is year, which is time. And Nefesh, which is soul, which is consciousness, is a confluence of soul into space-time. What we learn from this, though, is that our souls come from above space-time. We are not from here.
All right, this is
We were sent down here.
also known as El Camino Real.
I don't ask people anymore where they're from. I ask where you were born, where you grew up. Where you're from is somewhere else. We came down here into space-time, and we became subject to the rules and the limitations of space-time. But our challenge is to rise up, to connect to our soul power, the godly power within us, and to become masters of space-time. Sounds science fiction, but I'm talking Judaism.